Penguin Random House Audio presents Blackwing, The Raven's Mark, Book 1, by Ed Mcdonald. Read for you by Colin, Mace.
Chapter 1. Somebody warned them that we were coming. The sympathizers left nothing behind but an empty apartment and a few volumes of illegal verse, a half-eaten meal, ransacked drawers. They'd scrambled together what little they could carry and fled east into the misery. Back when I wore a uniform, the marshal told me only 3 kinds of people willingly enter the misery: the desperate, the stupid, and the greedy. The sympathizers were desperate enough. I gathered a dozen stupid, greedy men and set out to kill them. We left Valengrad on an afternoon that stank of drains, regret, and the end of another bad summer. The money didn't justify the risk, but hunting men was what I did, and I didn't intend to allow our quarry to get far. Half the rabble I'd raised hadn't been out in the misery before. They were practically shitting themselves when we headed out through the city's narrow gate. Within a mile, they were asking about gillings and dulchers. 2 miles out, and one of them began to cry. My old-timers laughed, reminded him we'd be back before dark. 3 days later, the arseholes were somehow still ahead of us. Nobody was laughing anymore. "They made for Dust Gorge," Tanotta said. He fiddled with the dials on his astrolabe, held it up to eye the distance between the moons. "Told you they would. Didn't I tell you that, Captain?" "Like balls you did." He had. The footprints in the grit were proving him right. "I sure did." Tanotta grinned at me, mustard yellow teeth stark in his treacle-dark face. "I remember. You came into the bar with the papers and I said, 'I bet they make for the gorge. Figure that earns me an extra share.'" "Even if this job paid well enough for extra shares, you still wouldn't get one. And it doesn't," I said. "Not my fault. I don't pick the jobs," Tanotta said. "That's the first time you've been right today. Now keep quiet and plot us a course." Tanotta raised the glass eyepiece towards skies the colour of a week-old bruise. Dirty golds, hints of green, torn purples, and ugly blood browns merged together, an easel of ruptured fluids and broken capillaries. He counted on his fingers, traced an invisible line from one moon to the next. The cracks in the sky were quiet, barely a whisper passing through the banks of restless cloud. Everything in the misery is broken. Everything is wrong. The sooner we shot the bastards and were heading back west, the happier I would be. We rode through banks of grit and sand, the rock black and red and drier than salt. Something rises up from the misery. You can feel it all the while, like air, but it's your enemy rather than your friend. It soaks into you, gets into your gums, until you can taste the poison. I just hoped it'd be over soon. 3 days into the misery, cutting south and east over black sands, we found the remains of their stolen horse. Whatever had torn its legs off, the sympathizers we were hunting had done the smart thing. They'd left the horse to its fate and run. A temporary respite, since they couldn't outrun us now. I could read relief in the way the men sat in their saddles. We'd have a pair of heads bagged and slung by sundown, be heading back towards what passes for civilization along the border. I took my flask from my coat and shook it. Not the first time I'd done that. It remained as empty as it had been on the last 3 occasions. Since I was out of brandy, that meant we only had small beer to drink, and not a great deal of that. The misery is dangerous for groups of heavily armed soldiers. That a pair of untrained, unprepared, and unarmed civilians had stayed alive and ahead of us for 3 days was enough to give me nerves. Another reason to get this over with as quickly as possible. The sand rode a trail clear to see. Ahead of us lay Dust Gorge, a narrow fissure in the earth. The gash cut through the landscape of shifting dunes, caustic sand and brittle stones. The lightning bolt corridor mirrored one of the rents in the sky. The split in the earth a reflection of the damage in the heavens. One of the sky's cracks began its high, sonorous wailing, causing my troop of knot soldiers to reach for spirit stones and amulets. Free company men might have grit, but they also have more superstitions than a priest on festival day. They wanted out of the misery as much as I did. It was making them jumpy, and jumpy soldiers make a mess of even simple work. A generous man might call my troop of cutthroats soldiers. Generous men are generally idiots. "Nen, get up here," I called as we approached the slope that led down into the gloom. She was chewing black sap, jaws working, teeth dark as tar. There is no more irritating sound this side of the hills. "You have to chew that stuff?" "All the ladies chew it," she shrugged. "Just because some duchess has a mouthful of rotten teeth, it doesn't mean you have to imitate her sycophant friends." "Can't blame me for fashion, Captain. Got to keep up appearances." Why Nen thought anyone would be looking at her teeth when she was one nose short of her face was as baffling as the trend. Chew, chew, chew. I knew from experience that telling her to stop would be as pointless as telling Snotter to keep it in his trousers. I glared at her anyway. "You got work for me, Captain?" Nen said. She paused, spat half a lump of black sap into the sand. "We're going down. Just me and you." "Just the two of us?" The wooden nose strapped to her face didn't wrinkle, but the skin between her eyes creased. "There's only two of them, and they aren't even armed. They don't think we can handle it." "It's not them I'm afraid of," Nen said. She spat the rest of the black sap the other way. "Might be anything in there. Might be squeams. Dulces. Might be a big pot of gold, too. But we're too far south for dulces anyway. And for squeams? Just get your shit sorted, we're going down. We need both heads intact if we're going to get paid, and you know how the lads can get. Can't trust them not to get carried away. Courts don't pay out if there's any way they can avoid it. Remember what happened at Snosk?" It was Nen's turn to scowl. "Yeah, I remember." Snosk was a bad memory for all of us. Missing out on a full job's pay over a technicality doesn't sit right with anyone. To this day, I still have argued that you could just about make out a face if you arranged the pieces right. "Good. So get bright and ready up." I dismounted. My legs were sore from the saddle, the ache in my lower back crackling in a way it wouldn't have 10 years ago. Didn't spend enough time in the saddle anymore. Getting soft. Soft. Not old, that's what I told myself. Tanotta got down to help me ready up. He was even older than I was, and though I could trust him not to put a sword through anybody's face, that was only because he's about as useful in a fight as a wax helmet. More likely to injure himself than anyone else, and it was Nen's brand of nasty I needed down there. Tanotta checked over the straps on my half-armour, primed my matchlock as I selected weapons from the arsenal on my saddle and belted them on. I strapped on a short-bladed cutlass and a long-bladed dagger. No room to swing anything longer than an arm down in the gorge. I'd been down there before, a few years back. It didn't get very wide, more alley than valley. Nen looked suitably fierce in black and steel. Tanotta sparked up a flame and got our match cords smoking, the firearms primed and ready to spit lead. Didn't plan to use them. A matchlock ball will make an awfully big mess of something, but like Nen said, there might be squeams. Might be anything down in the dark guts of the soured earth. The sooner we cut the sympathizers' heads off and started back towards the city, the better. "There's only 3 places you can climb out of the gorge," I said. "Do you remember where the others are?" Tanotta nodded. He pointed the other 2 out to me, one about a mile off, the other half a mile east of that. "Good. If we flush them out, ride them down and wait for us." "Easy work." "Tanotta's in charge," I hollered at my boys, and they almost looked like they were paying attention. How I'd managed to pick up such worthless gutter rats I couldn't recall. Out of brandy, 20 miles into the misery, and a troop of vermin at my heels. Somewhere in my life, things had gone very, very wrong. A slope of loose rock and ancient fossilized tree roots led down into the crevice. Not easy to navigate when you have a weapon to carry and the walls are only 7 feet apart. There wasn't a great deal of light, just enough to pick out some poor footing. It was hard to avoid kicking showers of grit down into the dark, but we kept quiet as we could. Dust Gorge was deep, probably one of the reasons that the enemy liked to use it as a meeting point for their spies and sympathizers. Our patrols didn't often switch.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?